All right. So first thing, before we start discussing any of the materials for today's lecture, is that since we are running a little bit behind with respect to our items that we need to discuss, so I will be extending the project deadline, which is upcoming. I believe it is on the 10th of March, which is this Friday. I'll be extending that by 2 more weeks, give or take, so that we can finish off the JavaScript aspects that we are discussing currently, and how to use JavaScript for front-end manipulations, and then probably do a homework on it as well, probably by the end of this week, and then get a little bit more understanding as to how JavaScript is used to kind of manipulate the DOM and stuff like that, so that you can utilize some of those fundamental aspects with respect to the work that you're doing for project phase one. Okay. I will also discuss some of the other aspects of working or how to create your report for your projects, probably in the next class or in the next Tuesday. We will kind of go over that and make sure that it is clear as to what the directives are with respect to how you are going to create your project reports. Okay. So again, if you have any questions, let me know now or after the class. We can discuss that and we can clarify any kind of issues that you may have. Okay. But more or less, I believe everybody is clear with respect to what we are going to do in terms of project phase one. Okay. All right. So moving forward, what we had covered the last time when we were talking about this topic was the fundamental aspects of various JavaScript programming syntax, right? So we covered about conditional statements, loops, functions, and those kind of things. We talked about arrays, how to perform some basic operations in arrays using JavaScript syntaxes. And then we also discussed some higher order array methods. So basically some methods that are built specifically to deal with arrays, such as the for each operator. So there are two more higher order array methods that are kind of useful from time to time when you're working with front-end manipulations using JavaScript, which is the map method. Okay, so it's a method that can be called with the array itself that allows you to take an existing array and then create a new array by applying some sort of logic or manipulations on all of the indexes of the existing array itself. Then the second higher order array method that is there, which is known as filter, that also basically creates a new array. But what you can do is when you're applying the logic, let's say by using the map method, then you can essentially, as the name suggests, which is filter it out, you can reduce the size of the existing array by applying certain conditional logic on top of the indexes that are or elements that are present within your array, right? So that is basically the gist of what the map method and the filter method does. So we're not going to look at it in an isolated fashion, the example of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you as we move forward and work with full prototypes of different project demos that we can do with JavaScript. And I'm going to show you how the map and the filter method essentially works in action when you are looking at it from a very more comprehensive context rather than in a standalone fashion. In addition to that, JavaScript also has what we call as object literal. So if you're trying to declare any kind of object literal, you will follow the same declaration style as that of a variable. The only difference is that it allows you to kind of save different data aspects regarding a certain object that you're trying to save under a single roof. So for example, let's say if you want to create a student object, so you can give the type specifier. So let's say it's a const type specifier and the value is not going to change throughout the life cycle of the program. And then you can give it a name for the object itself. For example, student record. And then what you do is basically, instead of like we have seen for arrays, we use third brackets in order to declare our arrays and stuff like that. But here, what we do is we use our second brackets, okay? And then within that, the way you want to declare your object is basically in the form of a key value pair. So you write your key, and then with a colon separating it, you write your values, right? So for example, if you want to declare, let's say, or if you want to store something like a student name as one of the keys, okay, so then you can essentially use that, and then you can specify what name is there. You can separate all of these values using comma, and then you can continue working with the rest of the key value pairs that you're trying to write, right? So that's basically an object, and then it is terminated by a semicolon at the very end of the statement, right? Or very end of the declaration. So what this allows you to do is basically, if you're not, let's say, working with a database or something like that, and if you want to, let's say, temporarily store a set of values for a particular object, right? Or if you want to do some sort of like a static storage, which is local in nature, then objects are pretty helpful in order to create a data storage kind of structure, and then kind of deal with all of those information from within the object itself, right? So we will see more examples of the objects as we move forward again, just like we will see for map and filter. But what I want to start off with today is basically work with the calculator app. That is one of the most fundamental apps or demos when it comes to understanding JavaScript. And then we are going to cover different aspects of the JavaScript programming syntax that is used for DOM manipulations when you are developing front end. All right. So I have already created this new folder, which is calculator.js 23. So what we want to do is essentially set up first our project folder, talk a little bit about the design layout of our calculator app. That will basically be like, going over an algorithm of a program and understanding what is the requirements, and then start off with the implementation of the different aspects that are involved within the development process, which is to basically set up our HTML file, because that is what will be rendered, make it presentable. So we will have a CSS file, and then implement the logic, which is basically what JavaScript is going to help us achieve, right? So first and foremost, let me just switch out of this terminal here. So what I can do is I can just get out of this existing project that I am in, all right? And then I can switch into the calculator JS folder that I have created, which basically is blank at this point of time, right? So the first thing that I'm going to do is create my landing page, which is going to be an index.html file. And then I'm going to create a directory that is going to hold my JavaScript logic. So I will create a folder called JS. And then I will also create a folder that is going to hold my style file, which is going to be the CSS subdirectory, okay? In addition to this, of course, we have talked about Git and GitHub, right? So essentially, I would like to initialize this folder with a Git repository, and then eventually sync that to my GitHub repository. So what I want to do is basically first create a file just in case called gitignore, where eventually, if I need it, then I can specify within this file all of the folders that I don't want Git to track, okay? And I don't want Git to essentially push onto GitHub, such that I don't want to make it publicly available on the GitHub platform and stuff like that, all right? So the next step is to basically initialize my Git repository. So I'm just going to say git init, and then I'm going to leave it as such for the time being, right? So when we do some work, then we are going to do set up the staging area for Git, okay, by doing git add. And then once we are done working with all of the things, and when we are ready to commit, then we will do git commit. And later on, when we finish the project, or as we are working, we can create a new GitHub repository and then sync it with our Git repository here. And you can try that out after today's class, okay? Just to kind of put into practice if you're working with Git and GitHub for the very first time. All right, so once that is done, I need to create 2 more files within the subdirectories that I have created here. So I will move into my JS directory, and let's say I will create a new file here, and I will call it, let's say, app.js, all right? Not index.js, you can name it index.js. The reason why I want to call it app.js is just to give it a distinction that we are creating a so-called calculator app per se, right? So I will leave that as such. I will get out of this folder, okay? And I will move into my CSS folder, okay? And then I will create a style file here and call it style.css. Note that we are not integrating it with Tailwind CSS framework. We're just going to learn some of the basic CSS syntax and then a specific aspect of our display property for CSS that we are going to learn anew in this particular demo as well, which is learning how to use the display grid property of CSS display. Okay, that is one thing, if you remember, when we were talking about CSS that we did not touch upon, and we had kind of discussed that we would be coming back to learning about that when we get to this particular demo. So that is what we will be learning as well, in addition to DOM manipulation using JavaScript in this particular project, right? So our folder is more or less set up now. So this is what it will look like. So this is your root folder. Within the root folder, you have two different subdirectories, one to store your CSS file, one to store your JavaScript file. Again, if you remember, if you have any kind of media files, then you can create a subdirectory that is dedicated for your media and stuff like that. If you need to make a distinction between your source file and your distribution or build files, like we did in Tailwind CSS demos, then you can create those structures as well, okay? But for now, we just have a basic CSS style file, a logic file